Hey everyone, welcome back to Twin Oaks Farm Poultry. Thank you for joining us on our YouTube channel. And I want to introduce you to one of our chickens. This is Mr. Big Stuff. He's getting sleepy. He's ready for an afternoon nap. But would you believe me if I told you that Mr. Big Stuff is a runt? It's true. I know that he looks huge compared to the birds that he's surrounded by, but he is actually a runt. And I've got another good example here that I want to show you. Take me just a minute to move the frame of the camera. She's also a runt. It's harder to see that without other birds around her, the size difference. But I think you're probably wanting me to give you some explanation why I'm calling this big bird that I've nicknamed Mr. Big Stuff a runt. And that's what we're talking about briefly today on Twin Oaks Farm Poultry on our YouTube channel, runts, and what is the biggest problem with runts in a meat production operation with chickens. So welcome back. Thanks for being here. Really appreciate you joining us on YouTube, and love to bring you into the barn and show you some of our experience with raising meat chickens and producing top quality poultry from them. We strive to do a really excellent job, and we love to share that passion, and we love to share that process with people. So thanks for joining us. Please subscribe. We're working really hard to grow the number of subscribers on our YouTube channel, and we're working hard to improve our ability to make videos and the content of our videos. So thank you for joining us. Thank you for your patience with us. And back to the birds. So the story with Mr. Big Stuff. Hey, have y'all ever heard the song Mr. Big Stuff by the singer Jean Knight? Do you even remember that song? It's an old song, but you know, look it up, maybe play it one time, see what you think. But when I look at this bird, that's what comes to my mind is Mr. Big Stuff. And that song it's because of that song, because that song is just like a catchy beat, and it's upbeat, kind of makes you feel good, like to hear it. So anyway, Mr. Big Stuff, the story with him is he's a runt. And the reason that he doesn't look like a runt compared to the birds surrounding him is age difference. He's 8 weeks old, and the birds around him are 4 weeks old. So Mr. Big Stuff was in a flock of birds that hatched on February 22nd, and his flock went to the poultry processor when they were 6 weeks old. But he was really not, well, he wasn't this size. He wasn't at a size where we felt he was finished and he was ready to process into poultry. So him and 3 peers, 3 hens from his flock, we kept them here on farm, didn't take them to the processor with their flock, and decided to manage them separately as runts and give them the opportunity to really take off growing and finish and go to the processor with the next flock we have, which is this group that he's surrounded by. They were hatched March 22nd. So it doesn't always work out that you're raising chickens and then you have a group of chickens coming right behind them that you can coordinate processing dates with. But for us here at Twin Oaks Farm Poultry this year, at least for the first half of the year, it is working out that way. And that is because of what's involved in getting a processor lined up for your chickens. So not only with chickens, with almost any kind of livestock, I'm watching where my birds are. You don't want to step on the chickens you're raising for poultry. But with almost any kind of livestock, the processors, if you contract with a processor, they book solid for like a year at a time or more, and they book way out in advance. So our processor, in fact, is booked solid for the rest of the calendar year. This is April 2023, and they're booked for the rest of 2023. We had set up our processing dates for the entire year, the first week of January, and we had wanted to have flocks where we had a processing date every 6 weeks because we like to grow our flocks for 6 weeks at a time. So then we could, take a flock to the processor and then start a flock the next day. Well, even when we called the first week of January, there were blocks of time that were already booked solid that we couldn't get dates for. So as we adjusted our dates, we ended up with times for the first half of the year where like the flocks will overlap for maybe about 4 weeks at a time. So at first we thought that was going to really be a problem, really be kind of a liability for us, but it actually has turned into a little bit of a blessing, because normally with birds that don't grow uniformly with the rest of their flock, then they're runts, and so you either have to take them to the processor at the date their flock goes and they're really not ready to go to the processor, or you would have to have plans for keeping them, managing them as runts, and then dealing with how to process them later. And that's the problem. That's the biggest problem. I'm going to go back to showing you the birds. That's the biggest problem with runts in a meat production operation. They are ready to harvest at a different time than their peers. And with processors being so booked ahead and so booked solid, you don't have the flexibility of a backup date to say, oh, well, we're going to take most of the flock and we're just going to hold the runts back and manage them separately, and we'll get a backup date and take the rest of them to the processor later. There just isn't going to be the flexibility to do that. But with us having the staggered dates the first half of the year, it ended up that we've been able to, just like we did with Mr. Big Stuff and with this hen and the other two that came from that flock, we've been able to hold those runts back, manage them separately as runts, and decide to send them to the processor at our next processing date. He did fall asleep. He's taking a nap. You can really see the size difference there. He's 8 weeks old, the big bird in the center, and the other birds are 4 weeks old. And they'll all go to the processor in 2 weeks from now. So they'll be 6 weeks old, and Mr. Big Stuff and his friends will be 10 weeks old at that time. So we're able to do that because we already had the processing date in place. So that is the biggest problem with runts, is that they're just going to be ready to harvest at a different time. And in fact, this group of birds that were hatched March 22nd and that are 4 weeks old, there's about 225 of them total. We've actually taken about 22 of them out of this main building and put them in a separate building, and we're managing them as runts. And they're not going to go to the processor when these birds all go, and we'll keep them a little longer, and they'll go with the next group that'll be moving in. So actually we're excited, supposed to be moving chicks in within the next 24 hours. So just really fortunate to work with all the great people and businesses that we do. Our USDA inspected processor is Pleasant Valley Poultry in Baltic, Ohio. They do a great job processing for us, and they stay booked throughout the year. So they're doing a great job for a lot of people. And we work with Beverly Feed and Equipment in Beverly, Ohio for our poultry needs here, our inputs like feed and bedding, and we actually coordinate with them to get our chicks. They help us stay in contact with Mount Healthy Hatchery around Cincinnati, Ohio, and that's where we get our chicks from. So the whole process, it just really is a lot of different parts that have to work together, and the processing is a big part of that. So if you're working with a processor, that's going to be your biggest challenge if you encounter runts. If you're processing on your own, it really becomes a non-issue, because you can just process the main part of your flock when you want to, and then spend some extra time growing those runts out if you have to, and process them as they're ready. But if you're working with a processor, be prepared to do some problem solving if you do encounter some runts in your Cornish rock cross meat chicken flock. Thanks for joining us at Twin Oaks Farm Poultry. We appreciate you so much. Thank you very much for watching, for helping us grow the number of our subscribers. And we encourage you, please interact in the comments if you want to share your experiences with us, or ask any questions, or comment on anything that you see in our videos. We love to hear that feedback. So thank you for joining us. Please subscribe to Twin Oaks Farm Poultry, and we'll see you back in the barn again another time. We'll probably do an update on Mr. Big Stuff again before he leaves the farm.